Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last webinar of the spring season. Thank you for taking the time to be here. We appreciate you. Today's topic, we are talking with Jim Miller and Gina McClard of Respect Outside. They have a great presentation ready for us on preparing reports and investigating sexual harassment claims. Before I turn it over to them, before we get started, I just have a few America Outdoors announcements for you. Managers Academy is coming up quick. That will be an online course April 10th and 11th. We have just a few spots left. So if you or if one of your managers or owners is interested, please get signed up as soon as possible. That's coming quick, and we've got a lot already in there. We also have 2 fall fundraising trips coming up. These trips are a ton of fun. They help support our organization in government affairs work, and they are great learning and networking opportunities. So I have Brian here. This is Brian from Adventures on the Gorge. He's here with us, and he is going to tell us a little bit more about one of the trips. He's hosting the West Virginia Gully Season Experience trip. So Brian, why don't you tell us a little more about it and why we should go?
Great. Well, we're really excited to host one of our fundraising trips this fall. And just a very brief history of Adventures on the Gorge. Adventures on the Gorge came together a little over 16 years ago when Class 6 river runners, mountain river tours, and rivermen and Songer outfitters in West Virginia all came together to form, to kind of evolve from hard adventure rafting business into a destination resort. Since that time, when we merged, we started off with 8 cabins. We've since built now, we have 124 cabins, 15 RV sites, 48 campsites. We have 5 different restaurants, a swimming pool, a conference center, and over 30 adventures. And so we've really, I think, are on the front lines of that conversion into a destination adventure resort. So the experience we've put together this fall is we are treating it just like we do any of our very high-end corporate retreat experience. And we're going to start off with an arrival on Tuesday, October 1st, with a meet and greet dinner on one of our decks that overlook the Newber Gorge. Wednesday morning, we're going to get up and we're going to do a half-day Lower New River trip. Afternoon will be open for hiking or a facility tour, or you could have the optional ability to add on another adventure. All meals are included. There'll be breakfast, lunch, and dinner each day. On Thursday, then we're going to do a half-day adventure that you can choose from. You can choose from one of our zip line programs. We have 3 different zip lines. We have a canopy tour, a longer, higher, faster zip line, and an adventure park, and or other adventure, another half-day adventure. And again, all meals are included. We're going to try to allocate the afternoon on Thursday for sort of an information sharing, brainstorming, just information sharing amongst the group that I think is very effective in just sharing ideas with each other. Friday morning, we're going to get up very early and we're going to head out to the gully. We're going to do the upper gully on day 1. We have a spectacular campsite halfway down the river with hot tubs, and we're going to do a big meal program out there and enjoy a gully evening. Next day, we're going to get up and do the lower gully. We'll start off with the breakfast. We'll come back to our base camp Saturday afternoon, and we have lodging again on Saturday, and you'll be able to kind of see our resort at full tilt when we may have 800 to 1,000 people on campus. And so you guys will be able to experience that and enjoy that and have some fun with that too. So we'd love to have you join us this fall. It's going to be a great experience. And if some of you want to do the experience but don't want to raft the upper gully, we can drive you in on Friday, and you can enjoy the overnight experience and raft out on the lower gully the next day. So we'd love to have you. And if you guys have any questions, please let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. We're excited. It's going to be an awesome trip. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for putting this on for us. We look forward to being on the river with you all and being at the resort with you all.
We're really looking forward to it. We host a lot of our outfitting friends throughout the years, and we'd love to see everyone come in and experience our resort.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Um, and now we have Gina McClard and Jim Miller. Thank you for being here. Um, we are gonna, without further ado, get you started. But just for the audience, I'd like to remind you, we will be taking questions during this. Feel free to drop any questions in the question box. I will monitor that. I'm gonna disappear, but I will monitor that. If you need anything at the end, we'll have a questions. So feel free to raise your hand there. And the session is recorded, so you should receive that tomorrow, the recording of this session. So, um, Gina, Jim, all yours.
Great. Thanks so much. I just want to make sure that everyone can see the screen that we're sharing that has the Respect Outside slide on it right now. Is that good, Karen?
Jim, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm Jim Miller. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a co-founder and the business development director at Respect Outside. This session that we're doing today on reporting and investigating sexual harassment claims is a makeup session. We were supposed to do this live and in person at the December conference, and due to Gina got a little sick.
Yeah, I didn't have a voice.
And so we're making that up with you all today. We're really excited to be here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run through the content that we have for you here today. We'll pause at the end of each kind of section and see if there are questions. While we're in this presenting mode, we can't see your hand raised or in the chat. Karen's going to be monitoring that for us. So do put your questions in the chat function or raise your hand. If you have specific questions, we received a couple questions in advance that we will address at the end of the session. So we're going to get started. Tell you a little bit about Respect Outside. We started in 2020 following the need to create cultures of belonging through harassment prevention and respectful workplace conduct. So my background is I'm a 40-year veteran of the outdoor industry. I started raft guiding in college and have worked all over the Western United States and for mountain travel on the Zambezi River for 6 months as well. But have run operations, been an owner operator of outfitted business as well. And so I bring a lot of understanding of what it is to operate in these kind of unique business environments and the pressures that we're under, right, with training staff, the seasonality of the business, and all of it, right? And then I'll let Gina kind of introduce herself as well.
Hey, everybody. I am Gina McClard. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Respect Outside. I use she, her pronouns. I am an attorney who has been working in the field of violence against women, gender-based violence, whatever you call it, including sexual harassment for the past 30 plus years. I'm not going to say 40 years because that's not right. And I have come from a background mostly in nonprofit world and academia, working head on to try and find solutions to the barriers in the civil and criminal justice system for survivors of sexual violence, sexual misconduct, sexual harassment. We've seen big changes in these 30 years. I have personally, and I've also I'm new to the outdoor industry, so only jumped into the outdoor industry when we formed Respect Outside. So it's been very interesting for me to understand kind of the nuances and the special particularities about the outdoor industry as it pertains to sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. So today we're doing a very condensed version of these trainings. Almost each topic individually could be its own multi-hour, if not a day-long training. So please keep that in mind, that we are just going at the speed of light, trying to highlight some of the most important things. Secondarily, even though I'm an attorney, I am not your attorney. So what we're doing today is for educational purposes, and there's no attorney-client privilege created by this webinar. So we're talking about policies and procedures, which of course is not the most exciting of topics today. And I'm glad you joined me, because I actually do get excited about policies and procedures, not because I am primarily a dork about these things, which is maybe true, but I see such wonderful potentials and an avenue for policies and procedures, not only to keep a business safe, to keep everybody in compliance, but as an avenue for creating more equity in your workplace, an avenue to make sure that everybody is treated equally. There are very subtle ways that policies and procedures can actually benefit some and disadvantage others. And so we want to touch on two areas today: reporting unwanted conduct and investigating that unwanted conduct. And we want to show how it's not only utilizing your policies and procedures to make sure you're in compliance with the ever changing laws, but it's a way to make sure that you're treating your people really well, that you're making sure that you're relying consistently on your good policies and procedures so that everybody can lean into the transparency of the policies and procedures so that they know how they're being treated and governed if there was to be a problem. Everybody can look to really good policies and procedures to understand, what if I decide to report, what am I going to have to deal with? What is entailed? So this is really what we're focusing on today.
Really interesting here too. We talk to a lot of different organizations, and we are really upfront with them. When they work with us, you often will see more complaints of unwelcome behavior after you adjust your policies and procedures and train on them. When you invite people to give you feedback that might be hard feedback about your personal interactions or the culture of your organization, you can expect to hear from people when you build that trust and when you create avenues for them to be able to share that information with you.
When you create an environment that says to employees, hey, if there is something off here, if you're being bullied, if you're experiencing some unwanted conduct, we want to hear about it. So a lot of times people say, hey, I don't think we need your services because we're good here. We've never had a complaint about sexual harassment here. And oftentimes I'll just say right away, well, statistically, you probably should have. And if you're not getting reports, I'm wondering if you don't have a trust problem in your organization. Do people believe that the report is going to go anywhere, that the company's going to do anything? And if those are the kind of attitudes that are prevalent, permeating your business, then you have to ask yourself, how can we open up this arena? So good policies and procedures really do attach directly to making employees feel that they can trust what's going to happen down the road with the organization.
Right. So we look at this harassment and discrimination when you get complaints around these illegal activities, right? Harassment and discrimination. We often tell people you've kind of gone too far, or you're a little too late to the party, and we need to start by looking at those disrespectful behaviors, the smaller things.
So we have this slide up here for escalation of unwelcome behaviors. And what is interesting about this concept, like Jim was saying, is for decades now, people have been trying to mitigate, prevent, eradicate sexual harassment from the workplace. And because sexual harassment is unlawful under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, there's some teeth to this. Companies are finding that if, in fact, they allow sexual harassment to prevail on their workplace, then there will be consequences. But what's interesting is after Me Too in 2018, there was a flood of research money around sexual harassment. And one of the most fascinating things that is percolating up, is that if you try and eradicate sexual harassment, racial discrimination, right at that point, you've missed the boat. It's too late, because research shows that uncivil behavior, impolite behavior, disrespectful behavior, small nonverbal or rolling of the eyes, that kind of behavior, if allowed to exist in an organization, if that behavior is not called out, if you don't have a policy that tells everyone, we won't tolerate this smaller behavior, then very likely you're going to see sexual harassment or other types of harassment and discrimination in the future. What the research shows is these small behaviors allow an individual, if they are allowed to continue acting in this way, nobody stops them. The culture of the workplace isn't such that, hey, man, that's out of line. We don't talk like that here. If that is not part of the energy and the life and the blood of an organization, these people feel emboldened and will often act out in more egregious and then illegal ways in the future. So, we're going to be talking today about reporting and investigations, but you'll see how we weave in some of these ways at getting at this lower level, not illegal behaviors that research shows are causing big, big problems.
Do you want to talk a little bit about code of conduct and how that can give some teeth to those
Right.
actions?
So, as we mentioned, clearly most people are having a sexual harassment policy in their policies and procedures. But what you want to be able to do is have a code of conduct or a civil respectful behavior policy that says, we want everybody who works here to show up on day one in a respectful fashion. You want this policy of respectful behavior to have many, many examples of respectful behavior, and then many, many examples of disrespectful, uncivil behavior that would violate this code. And that's because people need examples, people need clarity. When your policies and procedures are very clear, it gives guidance to your employees. People know that from the get-go, we're asking you to stop these smaller behaviors. We're asking you to show up consistently, respectfully, um, in guidelines with our civil policy. So I really recommend that you have this policy in your policies and procedures, because if you want to have a dialogue with someone, if you need to discipline someone for repeatedly um, exhibiting these behaviors, it helps you to have a policy in your policies and procedures so you can have this dialogue with the individual. We know that you can put almost anything you want in your policies and procedures, even if it goes above and beyond what the law says. But then the linchpin is that you have to consistently apply your policies. You have to consistently hold people accountable if they're violating these policies. So, this is all to say, if you're just starting, if you're joining us here today because you're concerned about sexual harassment in the workplace, that's excellent. And we have lots of great information for you. But if you have never thought that maybe there's other behaviors swirling around quietly, sometimes these behaviors are a little bit more quiet in your workplace, then you need to step back and try and make sure that it is known that your workplace doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior. Because, like we've said, that kind of behavior left unchecked is going to cause you bigger problems down the road.
And really, it's a great tool to be able to have that conversation where this is now we're talking about not, you and I having a conversation about values or about politics or about identities, right? But we're talking about the we, right? The organization. Here at Name Your Outfitted Organization, we believe this. And so it gives you a larger platform for to hold these conversations and to really make the change that you're looking to make in your organization. So we're going to jump into reporting, but Karen, are there any questions right off the bat?
Jim, I don't have anything new right now. If anyone has questions, feel free to type them in, but right now we're
Perfect.
good.
We're going to jump into the meat around reporting.
So, a lot of what we're going to give you today are things that you need to have in your policies and procedures to protect your employees, to give them guidance on how they are actually going to be able to better use these policies that you've created. Furthermore, what we know from the case law in sexual harassment cases is that the courts are looking to see not only if you have a reporting policy and an investigation policy, certainly a sexual harassment policy and anti-retaliation policy, but they're looking to the content of what these policies are. It seems like the courts are getting more sophisticated and they're not just checking the box if there is a reporting policy. They want to see a reporting policy that it doesn't have any inherent or invisible barriers to people reporting, or they want to see that you have the state of the art kind of business excellence standards on what should be in each of these individual policies. So with reporting, this is saying to your workforce, we want to hear from you. When something happens to you that is unwanted in this workplace, help us build a better culture, help us correct these behaviors that maybe somebody isn't quite conscious that they're doing, but we all need to come together and try to eradicate this. Now, just as a tiny little background of information that we won't go into today, but we, of course, encourage 100% that you have a policy that encourages people to report unwanted behaviors that aren't tolerated in your business. And that secondarily, you say to individuals, we have multiple ways in which you can report this information. We want to hear from you. If you have a reporting policy, but yet there seems to be a lack of application of it, it's very complicated and not easy to understand, then first of all, it's going to be a barrier to your employees being able to utilize that aspect of reporting in the workplace. And the courts, if it ever gets all the way up to a legal lawsuit, the courts are going to look at how clear your policy is. Is it a consistent policy so that it can be duplicated with every single person who reports? Is it specific enough so that we understand what we should do? So these are things that are essential when you have a reporting policy in your workplace. So for a good reporting policy, I want to see that there are multiple avenues in which people can report. You, with small organizations, there's only a few people in these sort of positions. So you want to make sure that people have multiple avenues. And, we've worked with clients like this in the past that sometimes they don't have that many people. So then we rely on, if they have consultants that they work with, if there's a board of directors to this organization, can you pull from people not directly involved in the day-to-day operations who can be that individual to receive a report? Secondly, you want to make sure you have a female identifying person who people can report to. And that's because statistically, we know that it is women identifying individuals who are experiencing sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and other types of discrimination and harassment in the workplace. So inevitably, you're going to want to be able to provide a woman to whom women who are experiencing these issues can report to. Now, a great third avenue for your reporting policy is if you were to provide an anonymous option. What they say is that statistically, 27% of individuals in a workplace will report if their company has a generic reporting system, like reporting straight to your supervisor, assuming your supervisor isn't the problem, right? That's one of the reasons for multiple avenues. If you only say report to your supervisor, but the supervisor is the problem, then nobody's going to report. Anonymously, the percentage of individuals willing to report goes from 27 with a generic reporting policy to 78% of people are willing to report anonymously. But there are pros and cons with anonymous reporting. A lot of times, since it's anonymous, there's no follow-up. You can't follow up with the individual who made the report to ask clarifying questions. Sometimes it's hard to actually get at the crux of the issue. But here's the wrinkle with that. A lot of times people know what's going on in the workplace, and there are perhaps other issues that have come up previous to this. And so there are ways to get at what the issue is, even if the anonymous report is somewhat nebulous. Sometimes people utilize a climate survey that you get an anonymous report. You haven't had reports about sexual harassment for years. And all of a sudden, there is this report that kind of insinuates there are other problems in the workplace. You can do a climate survey, a flash survey that you send out to your staff that ask questions about sexual harassment. And then you're getting a snapshot in real time about what's going on. And you might just be able to suss out the problem from there. But it's always good. And at any time, if you want to do a climate survey, you can, to sort of, check out what people are feeling, how people are feeling. Emotional, psychological, and physical safety is the new frontier for the workplace. And many of you, as outfitters, you know this well, that risk assessment and your risk protocols are very detailed and very thorough. Well, similarly, the way we treat people in the workplace is more and more being moved into this risk assessment realm. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I haven't been in the outdoor industry long, and I haven't been in industries before that had such a high risk element to their workplaces. But now that I am here and I see all this work that's gone into a risk assessment program, I, I'm astounded that it doesn't include the physical and emotional and psychological safety that issues of sexual harassment or some other harassment and discrimination issue that happens, say for instance on the water, isn't part of the trip report, isn't further investigated as one of your risk assessment issues that we need to follow up on afterwards. And so I'd really like you to think about these kind of sexual harassment behavioral problems in your workplace as safety issues that need to be addressed.
And it's great because, that post-trip debrief, we're used to talking about safety-related issues. We're used, there's a flip in the same rapid in the same place 2 days in a row. That's an item that you're bringing up to the entire team and you're discussing. And why are we not talking, as Gina is saying, about how people are impacted in these human-related skills?
And the last thing I want to say right here is it is really helpful if you have a reporting form that helps the individual who is tasked with receiving a report, helps them guide them on what they should be asking. And it reminds them that a report is about the who, what, when, where, and why. And so your reporting document, again, since everyone's going to be using it, it provides consistency in your organization. Everyone's going to be treated the same. Everyone who comes to report is going to have to answer the questions on the reporting form. It also allows for consistency in your supervisory staff who are taking these reports. There's a lot of turnover, people are changing jobs, and so somebody who comes in new should be able to take that reporting form and hopefully already having some training on how to take a report will feel at ease and comfortable being the first initial person that a report does interact with. Now, you want to make sure in your reporting policy that you also let your staff know that not only can they report internally, and that's all the things we just talked about, but if they don't feel comfortable reporting internally, they can report externally. Every state, except for Alabama, has a Department of Human Rights, Department of Fair Employment. It's called different things in lots of different states, but there is a reporting mechanism and a way to report outside of the organization through your state. There's also the opportunity to make a report at the federal level, and that is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The EEOC is charged with collecting reports and investigating reports of a variety of discrimination and harassment that is illegal in the workplace. So specifically for us today, the EEOC is a place that you can report federally if you're having a problem of sexual harassment in your organization. So keep that in mind. It's really important in your reporting policy to tell the individuals that there are statute of limitations, which means there are timelines in which you're allowed to report sexual harassment. And if the time has gone over, then that claim has expired. The laws are different in each and every state, And federally, you have about 180 days to report unless your state reporting mechanism is longer, and then the EEOC will uh, defer to the state's requirements. But it's really important to know that there are time limits. Now, in our state, Oregon, it's 5 years. Oregon has the longest statute of limitations for reporting sexual harassment. But this is something that you should be putting in your policies and procedures so people know, how much time do I have? All right, moving on. So you have a great reporting policy. That is awesome. But where is it? How do I know about it? Uh, am I getting the feeling that you guys want to hear from me if I have to dig through the handbook to find out how to report? Here's what we recommend. Publicize your reporting policy. Put a QR code that includes your policy and how to report up on the wall in the women's bathroom or wherever people are congregating. This does two things. Obviously, it makes it super easy on the individual who wants to report. But again, it's sending this message like we care. We're not going to blackball you if you make a report. We aren't going to treat you poorly because we don't want to hear about the problems. We care. And that is essential.
And again, I'm just going to go right back to that safety message, right? You would ask that bus driver to bring to your attention balding tires on a bus, or a broken oarlock on a frame. Those types of things we talk about. We bring it forward to make sure that the business is going to run smoothly. This is exactly the same thing.
Yep. So a lot of people don't realize that staff is supposed to be trained every year on their policies and procedures. And that is coming from most state departments of fair employment or Department of Human Rights, depending on what it's called. Now, I'm going to say particularly supervisors who are responsible for making these reports, for making sure they're taking the report in the proper way, respectfully, and we'll talk about this. You just want to make sure that everybody understands their role in this really, really important process. You want to make sure that the person taking the report is trained to understand that they've got to take it seriously, that they have to be respectful of the individual coming to report that information. It's important to understand that people show up in lots of different ways. And you really kind of need to check your bias on what, if you're anticipating what it's going to be like the first time I take a report of sexual harassment. But if you've got maybe movies in your mind, or you just haven't experienced this yourself, or it's different from person to person, you got to understand that people are all different, and people respond in different ways to being a target of sexual harassment. So some people might be really upset. Some people might be really angry. Some people maybe have experienced this multiple times and are kind of flat and not really trusting this is going to go anywhere, but they recognize this, they've been here before, and they're just telling you what's happening. So it's important to understand that you don't know what the target who walks into your office is going to be like that day, and you shouldn't assume or allow some unconscious bias you have in your head that says, if she's not really upset, this must have not been a very big deal. So just keep that in mind. And that would come in when you're training your staff about sexual harassment. Now, here's a critical piece. When somebody reports sexual harassment, it is required by law that you give them several documents. You want to give them another copy of that sexual harassment policy that you have. You want to give them your reporting policy. You want to give them the investigation policy and procedure. If there's a code of conduct that is pertinent to this report, you give them that. And most importantly, you want to give them the anti-retaliation policy that your company has. And here's the reason why. The majority of very expensive litigation that goes on at the federal level at the EEOC level after people make complaints of sexual harassment and the EEOC investigates. The majority of the cases that go to completion and that have financial consequences for a company are anti-retaliation cases. Lots of times, even with the underlying sexual harassment report is unfounded. There's just not enough information to say definitively, yeah, this was sexual harassment according to your policies. If the behavior that the individual endures, the target endures, or the witness endures, anybody involved in the investigation, if they are retaliated in subtle or in extreme ways, then this is a problem. And it's a problem that has teeth, and it has a problem that has a dollar sign with it. And so companies need to really understand that how folks are treated after they make a report is essential. And we're not necessarily just talking about, the stereotypical anti-retaliation is the reporting individual gets transferred away because he or she is a problem, or the reporting individual gets asked to go on leave while this is all sorted out. These kind of burdens that are put on the reporting party are really problematic, but there are subtle and smaller ways in which people are retaliated against. And it can be social. Like after you make a report on a really popular guide, then 2 days later, everybody's going out for a beer and you don't get invited. Or you can fill in the blank here. There is subtle retaliation that happens that, even though I'm using the word subtle, the retaliation in any form is a problem for not only the target, because that certainly dissuades her from wanting to come forward, or any other employee who is watching this process. When that individual who's made a report and participates in the investigation is getting hassled, called out, isolated, the message to the rest of the staff is watch out. You're going to be considered a problem if you report, so be careful. So that is why after you get a report, number one, all supervisors, all leadership needs to go on heightened alert to make sure that there is no retaliation in the workplace. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things you need to realize, and I'm telling you, almost 99.9% of our clients that we work with, there is there is a line between sexual harassment and sexual assault. And a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, we're talking about sexual assault, but they've been framing it up as sexual harassment to me. So sexual harassment is under the civil guidelines for laws in the United States. So it's a violation of a civil law. Sexual assault is a criminal law and is in a whole nother category with a whole different independent set of consequences that come from the state who may prosecute you. So you need to know that the line is really around touching of an erogenous zone. Now I'm using this simplistically because every state law is different. Some are the same, but there are like 5 different pools. But the concept that you should think of is unwanted touching in a sensitive, private, or erogenous zone. And you'd be surprised to see how extensive that is in the laws in your different states. So you got to keep this in mind. If you're talking about and you're taking a report that has to do with sexual assault, then you're talking about making sure everybody's safe. Now you would want to do this with sexual harassment too. You, as the individual who's taking the report, needs to do a safety assessment. Is there something immediate that I have to do to make sure that the workplace is safe? In my reporting document, it has a question of the reporting individual. Do you feel safe here at work if the perpetrator is here or the accused? You can decide the language that you want to use in your policies, but it's important to remember that you might have a safety issue. And in that case, you may need to put the accused on temporary leave while you get your investigation going. And again, it's important to remember that the reporting party should not bear the burden of this potential safety issue. So you don't ask the person who reported sexual harassment to stay at home while this gets sorted out, because that is putting the burden on her and is seen as retaliation by the state and federal government.
Right. Or you move that person, that guy, to the family trips, and they get moved off the class 4, class 5 work that they've been doing. So those are all seen as retaliation. And as Gina was saying, your team is looking out for this, right? How is this person who's come forward, who's put trust in you, how are they being treated?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little about trauma-informed reporting.
Right. So this could be a 2-day training. And like I said at the beginning, this is a condensed training. We're going at the speed of light here. But one of the things that I want you to understand is that when you're training supervisory staff to be able to take these kind of reports, you just want to make sure that people have an idea of what it means to be trauma informed. And what that simply means is if you've gone through life and you feel like life is pretty good and you don't really have any inside wounds, great for you and lucky for you. But I think the most of us understand that, there are big bumpy roads in life, and sometimes it really affects us. Sometimes a previous wound can really be aggravated by a workplace incident. So it's just important for your staff to understand what that really means. So trauma is this concept of emotional injury that affects performance and well-being. And an organization that's really trying to make sure that their employees are psychologically safe are going to train on trauma-informed policies and the execution of those policies. So you want to understand that having trauma in the workplace negatively affects the organization and can cause problems with trying to build this community culture. So when you understand that everybody shows up in different ways and everyone reacts differently according to their life experience, then you're opening yourself to understand that maybe the reason why that person reacted that way when they reported is because they've reported at 3 different other companies about a similar situation. So having that in your mind and understanding that we're really trying to get better in the outdoor industry, in the outfitter world, regarding sexual harassment, but everything's not perfect. And this person might be coming to us with a history that makes the situation right now all the more worse.
So we kind of talked about reporting and moved through that pretty quickly. We're going to talk now about investigations, and then we'll take questions at the end as time allows.
Right. So I see our time, and I'm going to try and get us through this. I would have to say that most times when I'm reviewing policies and procedures, people don't have an investigation policy on the books. If they have an investigation policy, it is a couple sentences, but there's no procedure attached that helps guide the individuals on what to do with an investigation. So the law currently in the United States says, if you get a report of sexual harassment in your workplace, you must promptly conduct an investigation. So we're going to go through a couple of things that we recommend in your investigation policy, and then understand that the bulk of it would be in your investigation procedure. That's why we call them policies and procedures. The policy is kind of like the higher brow philosophical concept that we want to make sure everyone understands that we value here at the workplace. But then the procedure is the nitty-gritty on what we need to do. Lots of policies don't necessitate a procedure, but most definitely investigation does. So some people send all their investigations outside the house. They don't want to make sure, or they don't feel confident conducting an investigation procedure themselves, and so they send it outside. And that's always great. However, it doesn't have to be that way. So when you have an investigation policy and a corresponding procedure, you need to train your staff, even peripheral staff that might down the road be responsible for doing an investigation, so that everybody feels competent. So you must, by law, do an investigation for harassment and assault. And what the courts are looking for when they're going to be screening your investigation process is, was it prompt? Was it thorough? Was it objective? So with those prompts, I'm going to say prompt. Now that the courts want to know uh, just what is the timeline on the investigation? And the courts want to know this because this harkens back to, have I made my policies and procedures so clear to my staff that they know what to expect? I'll tell you, if you don't tell your staff what to expect when they report, what's going to happen, and then afterwards, during an investigation, there are many individuals who are not going to feel like they trust the system, or they have a realistic idea of what they're in for if they do decide to report this information. So by having a very specific investigation policy that tells people, from the time you report, within 5 days, we'll start the investigation. The investigation will be conducted by someone who is objective and neutral. So clearly, someone who doesn't have any involvement in the individual situation or any conflict of interest. And it's thorough enough. So how do you know if your investigation is thorough enough? Again, this goes back to your investigation procedure. You're going to have a protocol on what kind of evidence are you collecting during the investigation? Is there any texts, emails, other kind of correspondence? Who might be witnesses? Not only witnesses that may or may not have seen the actual alleged sexual harassment, but witnesses who were the first people that the target went to and explained what happened to her. In the law, this is allowed to come into evidence many times under the concept of excited utterance. I'm geeking out here now. But the concept is that this information of somebody being told for the first time right on the heels of a very upsetting event is close enough in time and close enough to the trauma that it's trustworthy. And so, when you're thinking about witnesses, they aren't just witnesses to seeing the sexual harassment. They're witnesses that might have been told what happened. And it might be a witness who was told by the accused, and somehow the accused told them that story. Okay, I'm trying to go faster. Okay, so you want to say when it will start, how long the investigation will take. It'll take 2 weeks to complete. Then how will we notify all the parties involved? Now here, parties are the target, the accused, and any witnesses who were involved. Because do not underestimate the emotional toil that it is to be a witness in a sexual harassment case. And furthermore, I want to reiterate that retaliation, anti-retaliation law extends to anybody involved in the investigation, including witnesses. So witnesses can easily feel like they're being iced out or separated as well, and that's considered retaliation.
And those witnesses also have that same effect, right? That same trauma that the target is experiencing, the witnesses experience very, very similarly.
Absolutely. And let me just clarify quickly here that you can you are covered under the law if you're a target of sexual harassment or if you're a witness of sexual harassment. You can create your own report and ask the company to do something, even if it wasn't you who was the target. So keep in mind, witnesses carry a lot of the water in these situations with sexual harassment because it affects them. We know that targets clearly are psychologically affected from experiencing sexual harassment, but folks who witness unwanted behavior, even those small ones we talked about in the beginning, or certainly more egregious behavior like sexual harassment, racial harassment, they are physically affected about that as well.
So when you tell folks, it's best to really do that in person.
Mhm.
It feels so impersonal to have gone through this whole thing and then get an email or a text about the findings. So again, as you're building your timeline out, let people know that they will be notified 2 weeks after the investigation begins. We should have it wrapped up, and we will notify you. We'd like to have you come into the office to hear about those findings.
That's right. And you're doing that for witnesses, targets, and the accused. Treat everyone with respect throughout this whole entire process. Now, if you need to involve law enforcement because you're talking about a sexual assault on your premises, then you need to understand that your policy should reflect that. You should let people know that upon hearing about a crime that's happened on the premises, law enforcement will be called. Now, here's why I like to say this generically, so that you're not in the position of determining whether or not you're going to call law enforcement on a given sexual assault case. You should be referring this all to law enforcement as a overall policy of the organization. Now, suppose the survivor or the target doesn't want this to actually become a full-blown criminal investigation. Well, they can decide that when law enforcement reaches out, and they can let law enforcement know they have no intention of, pressing charges, as people say these days. They have no intention of being involved in a criminal process. They're going to leave it to a sexual harassment investigation internally. Thank you very much. But what that says to each and every person is that we aren't deciding whether or not this is important enough to go to law enforcement. We just have a generic policy that says we will report any crimes on our premises. And then you can let the target survivor decide if she wants to go forward with a criminal investigation or not. But it's so important that at each and every step, you're looking at the fairness, you're looking at the neutrality of the company when you make these determinations.
And that, I think this can't be not we need to put a fine point on this, right? So this, you get one complaint of sexual harassment, and it actually turns out to be sexual assault because it involves touching. You need to be able to easily refer that and not be precipitating about whether, this one rises to that level or not. If somebody brings a gun onto the premise and that's illegal where you are, that's another crime that you are going to report. So it's not just related to sexual assault, but any sort of crime that happens on the premises.
An important thing to remember is that, can you go back to that
Yep.
slide? Is that you want to make sure your policy says that you will fully support and participate in the law enforcement investigation if it goes that way. And so this also says to targets of unwanted behavior, we've got your back. We will participate. We will do whatever we need to do to make sure we stop this behavior and we make sure it doesn't continue in the future. So we can skip this. You just want to make sure that your policies are clear enough so that everybody understands what they're in for. What is it going to look like to report? What is it going to look like if I participate in an investigation? If a witness is debating whether or not they want to get involved, you got to let people know. There's got to be some transparency. And having a really great investigation process like this allows for you to consistently, transparently, and regularly treat everyone the same way. These processes are repeatable, and that is what is so important. So here's some snapshot, real quick things about when you're doing an investigation. This should be in your procedure around your investigation. You want to make sure you're treating everyone with respect. Interview people in private with doors closed. Make it be as confidential as possible. You can tell folks that to the extent that we can keep this confidential, we will. You want to make sure that the folks who are conducting these interviews have had some training in being trauma informed and aren't making things worse by their questions. You want to make sure someone's neutral, not at all involved, not the best friend of the individual in question. Make sure people are empathetic. That, of course, will come back to the trauma-informed way you take an interview, and you want to check your biases. What do I think people are going to show up as? And if they don't show up this way, if I'm interviewing the accused and he seems likable and I know him, he couldn't have done this because he seems like a really nice guy. All these kind of things. You want to stick to the facts. You want to make sure that everything you're writing down is would be okay to be scrutinized by the courts. If you must write something that somebody says that is a value judgment, like I really think that he's crazy, then you write that in quotes or you say, Target said this. You don't take these comments as fact and write them down as fact. You just want to say, witness said he was late coming to the meeting, those kind of things, instead of saying he was late coming to the meeting. You want to make sure that you ask open-ended questions. Ask a question and let people talk. Don't interrupt them, just let them keep talking. If you see inconsistencies from the witness to the target to the accused, ask that question a different way. Do another open-ended question, but try to get at the inconsistencies. And then at the end, you thank everybody for their participation, particularly the report and witnesses, and ask them if there's anything they'd like to add. Then, absolutely, what is one of the things I see as the downfall of companies' policies and procedures is that parties aren't notified promptly and appropriately. So you got to think about how you're going to notify everybody with the results of the investigation, and do it in person. This is not something to get an email about. And you want to be transparent with your staff about what happened and any disciplinary action. So you want to tell the entire staff that you had an investigation and that somebody violated your policies and they were terminated, or there was corrective action taken. You don't have to be specific, but this goes to people believing that when they report, there's actually going to be something that happens. And a lot of people worry about how much information they give out after disciplinary action and investigation. And one way around that is to do an annual transparency report about unwelcome behavior in the workplace. So we got 16 complaints about unwelcome conduct and a violation of our civility code of conduct. We got 4 complaints about sexual harassment. And then you can talk about, after investigations, 2 people were disciplined and had to redo their training around sexual harassment, and 2 people were terminated. Or, so the company can decide, but here's why this is so important, and this is a trend in the university realm, is people aren't going to use your policies and procedures if they don't trust that something's going to happen. And how will they know that something happens? That transparency report at the end of the year is going to tell them everything they know.
So we've got a little
Need to know.
homework for you. We're wrapping up our time. We're going to get to questions and answers, but we'd like you to take a look at your policies and procedures, right? And you've got a lot of new information. Hopefully you took some notes, and do your policies and procedures hit all these high notes? Are your reporting, are you transparent enough? Is there enough guidance? Those types of things. And then really using your policies and procedures to build your culture, to make them your own, to create a welcoming environment for the entire staff.
Yeah, I know retainment is a huge issue in the outfitter world. And one way to make sure that you are better retaining your employees is to make sure that they feel a high level of trust. They feel a high level of trust when they've got clear policies and procedures and they can trust something's going to happen. The other thing is, when you've got a company that's really gets it and their policies and procedures are good, people who experience problems in the workplace are treated well, and there's resolutions, word of mouth spreads. People get to hear that and they are like, hey, that's a good place to work. I want to work there. So, this has a ripple effect, not only for your current employees, but also good internal structure and trust of your employees will help bring you better candidates in the future.
Great. And so we have a couple of questions. We're going to get to questions and answers, but we had two that were sent in advance of the webinar. I'll read the first one. So we provide an area for communal guide living. Are we liable during off hours? So I'll just leave
Okay.
it there.
All right. Okay. This is a whole nother conversation that we can go off. I'll tell you this. Are you liable? Let me frame it up this way. When the law that we have right now doesn't pertain specifically about liabilities of outfitters. Where it comes in, and any guidance we have is coming from the world of like the OSHA world and liability of employers when somebody's injured in employment housing. And the guide they use is, but for your employment, would you be living in that housing arena? And if you're only living there because it makes it possible, whether it's economically or proximity wise, to be working for that organization, you have to live there on the premises because you have no other options, then you do have a closer relationship to being at work when you're in guide housing. Now, there's a lot of questions I know that will come from this, but let me give you an example. If somebody's in communal guide living, they get hurt, and it's a serious issue, and the question is whether or not the company is liable for the conditions of the guide housing or that faulty board that the person fell through, whatever. Then this is most likely in that scenario, the courts are going to say, yeah, they're only there because they want to work there. And so therefore there is a relationship between work and living. It's not like you're living in an apartment off base and you're trying to sue the company for something that happened to you in your personal apartment. So the way I get around this, and let me know if you'd like to talk more about this individually, is I say that with your agreements, your work agreements, or your contracts, whatever you do with your employee, you have a housing contract and you have a code of conduct for your housing. And you can put whatever you want there as it goes to behavioral safety in guide housing. And so you can put in all kinds of things and ask that those who live in guide housing abide by these rules. And if they don't, they can't live in guide housing. So that's my short answer on that one.
Great. And the second question we got was, I hear for younger staff in the region trying to report, but not knowing how or what is involved in the process. Do you have any tips?
Yeah. First of all, the entire crew should be trained. If you change your policies and procedures, you better be training everybody on the changes in your policies and procedures. And this isn't coming just from the EEOC at the federal level. Like I said, this is from state departments of fair employment. They want to see that employees are given the chance to understand how to report unwanted behavior. So you put up your QR code for your reporting process, talk about it routinely, make sure everybody's trained on how to make a report of unwanted behavior. Train them so that they know that you want to hear these reports. Because if you're, I mean, I see lots of internal barriers set up just by the tone in which people talk about reporting unwanted behaviors. So that's that one.
Great. And any other questions? We're open to questions now. If you got them, thank you for staying late. If you've got to go, we understand, but happy to stick around for a little bit and answer more questions.
Yeah, I've actually got two questions in the chat here, if I can read them to you. First one, can you provide a sample reporting form?
We do have that is a service that we offer. I will say that. So you can contact us, jim@respectoutside.com. We have all sorts of reporting forms. We have advice and forms on anonymous reporting.
Well, your policies and procedures in general, how
Great.
to tailor make them for the culture you're trying to create at your organization, as well, of course, making sure that you're in compliance with the law.
Okay, second question. I help manage a team of people who individually take care of campsites deep in the backcountry. I'm curious if we might dive a bit into workplace environments that can put someone in an uncomfortable situation from time to time where the harassment and safety issues come from the public more than internally. What would you suggest for training around these potential interactions?
Yeah, so you're not alone there. We see risk factors, and you've hit on a couple, right? This isolated work environment, third party harassment. These are things that we see very, very regularly, right? You might have a culture that's really good and strong and doesn't allow for that stuff, but here comes Ranger Rick, right? And they're harassing your staff or your guests. So we see this a lot.
Yeah, and we have a whole tailored program on training on that, and it's a little complicated to be able to address it right now. Um, but I guess I would take it back to the topic of policies and procedures, and to make sure that you have this recognition from the get-go that employees are protected from sexual harassment no matter where it comes. The company has an obligation to protect that employee when he or she is out in the bush and far away. So what are the increased safety mechanisms that you've put in place to make sure that that person has someplace to go? Do they have an inReach? Do they have a sat phone? They have a way? Is it always a good idea to have only one person go? Should this be now a new person who actually has a partner? And I understand that's a staffing issue, but I could talk to you until this evening on this topic, because it's a new one for me. This isolated workplace here in the outdoor industry isn't something that I've encountered before. And so I have done a lot of research and asked a lot of questions like, what do y'all do in these cases? And from a legal perspective, I have a lot of answers.
Yeah. And I think Gina kind of hit on this point of like, when you're in that isolated work environment, how do you report these types of things, right? How would you handle, an injury, right? And how would you handle a report of unwelcome behavior? They should run in the same track.
Who can you call for help and advice as well? So, I mean, that's the thing. You don't necessarily have to be the person that's got to decide what to do. Get some help, get a supervisor on the phone and say, here's what I'm dealing with. What do we do next? That kind of thing.
Awesome. Can I toss you one more question?
Sure.
Do you feel that people are less likely to report if you have a policy of reporting to law enforcement any incident of sexual assault or misconduct?
Well, I feel like you might, if people actually know what they're dealing with. I got to tell you, almost 100% of the time, people, and understandably, don't know the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault. But you can decide the tenor of your policy. You can say that it's a policy of your organization to report any crimes that happen on the premises of the company. But you can also have a policy that says we will eagerly participate in a law enforcement investigation that goes forward, but at the same time, we will also support our employee friend and the target of the harassment in whatever she wants to do going forward. So that shouldn't be seen as a clash if the investigation is so egregious that it will go forward without the target. Then it's probably so egregious the company really needs to be involved for a variety of reasons, because there might be liability coming from the target around the situation of the assault. So I don't want to blur the waters. The majority of time, when you're talking about a sexual assault, it's often not so egregious that there's going to be this tension between the survivor and the prosecutor or the law enforcement. And these cases that go forward victimless, in the sense that the victims decide not to be involved, but yet law enforcement and prosecutors continue the investigation, they are very rare. They're hard to win, which is the reason why prosecutors don't want to take them. And they're hard to prove because your lead witness isn't willing to participate. So I say all of that is, if you had a policy that says the company will participate in any investigation that goes forward, but the company has the back of our employee and will support her if she decides not to participate in the criminal investigation, then you've covered both your bases. You'll say, if it's essential, it's so egregious that they're going to go forward even if the victim doesn't get involved, then you are protecting yourself, because that's a scary, egregious, potentially liable situation for the company. But the point I want to say is that the tenor of your reporting policy should always lean towards listening respectfully and being open to the target who's coming to tell you about something that is unsafe, undesirable in the workplace. I hope I'm answering that well enough. It's a sticky wick, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, I just want to interject. We don't have any more questions. We're about 10 minutes over. Really want to extend gratitude. Gina, Jim, thank you so much for putting this together. I know it was a long time coming. So thank you. And thank you for doing this. It's very important topics. And I know we could probably use like 3 more days of this, but thank you for doing this. To all the guests, attendees, thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of America Outdoors through memberships and engagement. So we appreciate all of
I
you.
just want to jump in and say, feel free to reach out to us. I'm Jim at respectoutside.com. Our website is respectoutside.com. You can find us on some social media as well. We don't do a lot there, but if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help.
Hillary shared that in the chat too, so that's great. If there are any further questions for us or them, feel free, please reach out. We'll continue these conversations individually. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a great day.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.